everyone, the iPad mini 6 is a very interesting iPad that Apple made so many years ago, back in like 2021, so it's not really that old. We haven't really gotten a successor to this device yet, and I don't know when we are going to. Hopefully this year there's going to be some changes and we're going to be getting basically the newer update to this device, but let's go and see how this iPad holds up in 2024. Let's see if it's still worth buying, if it's still worth picking up, and we'll check that out throughout this video. Now, first of all, if you want to pick up this particular iPad, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the iPad mini 6, on the front of this particular iPad, you were getting a pretty good size display. It was 8.3 inches and it was a liquid retina display as well. It was a true tone display and overall it looked pretty good. This was a pretty big difference coming from its predecessor, which was the iPad mini 5. The main advantage of this particular iPad was that you were getting, basically the same size type of display, but you were getting less bezels around it, which I think was actually a pretty big thing. So having less bezels on this display, was a really cool thing, and you weren't really getting a home button anymore. It was just basically the display that you normally get before. So that was something that was actually really nice, and I actually love that a lot about this particular, iPad. It was still a 60 Hz panel, so it wasn't like you were getting like a 120 Hz panel or anything like that. So still the same 60 Hz, but still very good. I'm a big fan of this particular, the way this particular iPad holds up is very nice because it looks very good, but keep in mind that if you're wanting basically like 120 Hz display, you're going to have to go for the iPad Pros because, the iPad minis really don't have that. On the sides of this iPad, this was another interesting thing going on here as well. And the thing I liked a lot about this particular iPad, in my opinion, was the fact that you were actually getting the flat sides with Apple Pencil 2 support. Apple didn't do that annoying thing here where they went through and made you, get the Apple Pencil 1 on this thing or something like that. They gave us the Apple Pencil 2 support on this thing, which was actually very cool. So if you were in the market and if you wanted to go ahead and basically get an Apple Pencil, you could get an Apple Pencil with the Apple Pencil 2 support on this particular iPad and have a really good performing device for the most part. So that was something that was genuinely very awesome, and that was something I liked a lot about this particular iPad as well. So if I'm going to go through and pick up an iPad, well, I want one that has this type of setup that has the Apple Pencil 2 support because it is so much better than the Pencil 1. And I'm sorry I took like 5 minutes explaining that. It's like my favorite thing ever. You were also getting a USB Type-C port on this thing as well. So just right there, you're getting a smaller iPad, Apple Pencil 2 support, and a USB Type-C port. Those are some really cool things to have inside of an iPad that is fairly small. And the fact that this thing is already so old now, it's like 2-3 years, it's 2 years old right now, or 3 years almost actually this year. It's going to be cheaper in the used market than it's going to be in the brand new market. It's another pretty big advantage for this iPad as well. On the back side, you were basically getting this complete flat back on this particular iPad, which is very nice. You have that camera in the top left corner, Apple logo right in the center. And overall, when I pick up this particular iPad, it is a very good iPad for the most part. Like, it feels very good. It doesn't feel super, cheap or anything like that. And to be fair, no iPad has really felt super cheap, but it is a very nice iPad nonetheless. And I am a big fan of the way this particular iPad holds up from that perspective. So from that side alone, I will definitely say it gets a thumbs up for me. Definitely easily one of my most favorite things going on for this iPad is the size and the way it basically feels. Now, on top of that, the price tag of this particular iPad, it doesn't really cost as much as you may think. It's a fairly cheap and fairly affordable iPad for the most part, which is a pretty big advantage for this type of iPad. Because if you're wanting to go through and actually pick up an iPad, this one doesn't cost as much. In the brand new market, it costs obviously just as much as used. Used to cost brand new. But in the used market, it doesn't really cost that much, which is a pretty big advantage. So that right there is a very cool thing that I love about this iPad, because it's not going to cost like a massive amount or anything even close to that, which again is a very, very cool thing going on for this particular iPad from there. So that right there is another big thing to keep in mind there too. In terms of the camera side of things, this particular iPad does have that single camera setup in the top left corner. It's a 12 megapixel wide angle camera on the back, and it's also a 12 megapixel camera on the front as well. Now you can do 4K at 60 on the back, which is very good, but the interesting thing here is that you actually do have a pretty good camera on the front as well. You can actually go ahead and have this camera and essentially like just you use that center stage capability, which will allow the camera to kind of follow you as you're kind of maneuvering around. And it's a very good camera nonetheless. Like, it's a very solid lens. And that's something I actually like a lot about these particular phones, is because you can get a phone with an iPad camera that holds up very, very well, which is very good. Now, I will also tell you on top of that, with this type of device, with the iPad mini 6, it is a very solid camera if you're trying to, just use it as a basic device. But if you're trying to take it up a notch, and you're trying to do like insane things, it may not be the best camera of all time. And the main reason for that is because this thing doesn't have the most amount of capability. It doesn't have like cinematic mode, and it doesn't have a dual camera setup or anything like that. Most probably your iPhone camera is better than this particular iPad camera. So it's not like you're going to replace your iPhone with this iPad, but it is really nice having this type of camera laying around because, just in case if something happens, you can always bounce back on this iPad, use it for a little bit, and that's a really cool thing going on for this particular iPad as well. So that kind of covers it up there. Now, in terms of software and longevity, this is another pretty cool thing going on for this particular iPad. So a really big advantage for this type of iPad is that you can actually go ahead and have this thing, have a pretty long lasting version of software ahead of it. So it's not going to last like forever, by any means, but it's a very good, decent version of a device, I would say, from a software perspective. And that is something that is actually very, very cool. So it's still going to be lasting for software probably for a long period of time. And there's a thing where it's like iPads typically last longer than iPhones from a software perspective. So that's something that's actually pretty cool. So if you're actually going through and actually using an iPad, you're probably going to have a longer lasting iPad, from an iPad on a software perspective than an iPhone, like a corresponding iPhone, even with the same chipset. So just keep that in mind as well. Not the biggest deal in the world or anything again, but just one thing to keep in mind there. In terms of performance, this particular iPad is a very, very good performing iPad. Apple A15 Bionic chip inside of it, that's a really good chipset to have inside of this particular device. It doesn't have like the most amount of RAM ever, but it's still a very good, performing, iPad. I keep trying to call this thing a phone. It's a very good performing device for the most part. And you're really not going to run into too many problems here. And that's a really cool thing when you're getting an iPad like this. It's not really going to, cost, it's not going to break the bank, but you're still going to be getting a very respectable chipset. Like this thing is still basically giving you the same type of chipset as something like an iPhone, like 14 for the most part. And so that's a really big thing going on for this particular device. So I say that to say, really anything you're going to be doing with this particular iPad is going to be perfectly fine. So whether you're, playing certain games or you're doing something very basic, you're going to be perfectly fine. If you're going up a notch and if you're trying to do like super insane things, if you're trying to do like, video editing on this thing or, taking massive amounts of notes or playing heavy intensive games, this iPad I think is going to be perfectly fine for a vast majority of people as well. And that is another really big advantage here. Because if you're picking up a, type of device, that is going to be a very, very cool thing that you're going to have that opportunity of having on this particular iPad. So that right there is another really big thing. Again, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's a mixture of that and basically everything else going on for this iPad, including its battery life, that kind of makes it a really, really good device that I actually like a lot. So I say that to say, without a doubt, the iPad mini 6, in my opinion, is by far probably one of the better iPads you can buy in the used market. This thing is not that expensive as it used to be anymore. And I will tell you, like, if you're going to go and buy an iPad, it's a very, very good device without a doubt. It's a very good device. It has a lot of capability and a lot of quality. And there really isn't that much to hate on here. Like, of course, if there's like, something else that might be a little bit better, like the iPad 10, the iPad, Pros, I would recommend buying those. But I still think the iPad mini 6, for the type of device it is, there's not really too many alternatives. So I will tell you, with this type of device, definitely gets a thumbs up for me. Very good. And if you want to pick it up, I would definitely say go for it. That pretty much covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.